welcome to another episode of Unleash Your Supernova Live. I'm here with my co-host and partner in crime for our live shows, Ryon Esquire, and that's Ryon with an O. So you already know you're in for a treat, right? Because you don't meet too many Ryons with an O. So if you love the content, definitely check out our pre-recorded podcasts at Unleash Your Supernova on all favorite podcast players, and subscribe, leave a review if you love what you're hearing. And if you love the content that Ryon is sharing, check him out at RyonEsquire.com. That's RYON Esquire.com. So a little about me. I am the founder of Raine magazine. I am also the author of the newly released book, Unleash Your Supernova. It covers how to survive the crazy roller coaster ride of entrepreneurship, but also you take away 101 action steps on how to boost creativity and beat burnout. Ryon is also a creative entrepreneur. He is a mindset coach, visionary, and business coach, and he loves helping those that are changing the world. So definitely check out RyonEsquire.com, and if you need any coaching guidance, definitely it's Ryon. Ryon's the only choice, I say, anyway. So anyway, let's dive into the show. Today we're going to be talking about tips and words of wisdom and advice on how to bring out the greatest version of yourself, okay? It is about leveling up personally, in business, in entrepreneurship, and loving everything you're doing. So we're going to talk a little bit about the psychology of fashion and why and how that ties into moving into the greatest version of yourself. But before we do that, I'm going to welcome my co-host. Hey, Ryon.
So do you think my mom spelled my name with an O because it makes you stop and go, oh? Is that what you think?
I do. And you know what? For some reason, you're sounding really far away. So come closer to your mic for me if you can.
Oh, am I? Okay. Is that better? No?
It's not, but I can hear you. So we'll just roll with it. So
okay.
I love the fact that she spelled your name with an O. I am a big fan of names, especially unique names. And I only know one Ryon with an O. I've only met one Ryon with an O. And I think it just makes you stand out a little bit. I think those little details make a really big difference in our personalities.
They do, because I grew up obviously having to spell my name, and when you're real little, that's kind of embarrassing, right? But then as you grow into it and get older, you kind of like it because it does make you unique. People look at it and go, oh, that really is different. I've never seen it spelled that way before. And, we all need those little advantages to stick out whenever we possibly can, right? So, I use it. It also makes emails and domain names super easy to get nowadays. So.
That's right. That's so true.
Mm-hmm.
That's so true. Mm-hmm. You know what? I actually have the opposite experience. My name is not that common, Nova, spelled just like it sounds, Nova. However, anything that I look for, like a domain name or what else? I guess a handle on social media platforms, Nova is very popular. So even though it's a unique name, I still have trouble trying to find different digital assets with just Nova anything. But, when I do Nova Lorraine, it's usually I'm good. There's not many Nova Lorraines in the world. But, I find that I have the opposite effect when I'm using my name, at least online, trying to create properties. And then it works in your favor. Ryon is a more popular name, but just spelled differently. So, what can you do?
It's so funny. I remember being a kid, and you could get little keychains with your name already in there, right? Or belts with the name already on there. And Ryon was always there. It was always just spelled with an A, so I wasn't going to buy something with a misspelled name. So it was just I just remember that because I remember thinking that's really cool. It really sucks that I can't get it because it's spelled wrong.
Yeah. Oh, man. So before we talk about fashion and unleashing, and, we like to start off by reflecting on our day or week and, talking about something that's interesting that happened. Do you want me to go or do you want to go?
You can go.
Okay. Well, this week is Earth Week for those that are listening to this in the future. And this past Tuesday, we did the Earth Day. We did an event for Earth Day, which was really, really great. And it was all about innovation and sustainability. Now, this is the kicker. It was a summit, okay, so a conference on Clubhouse. And we also streamed it live on Zoom. So, but wrapping our head around how do you create this physical event, this formal event on an audio-only chat, not Zoom or these other live digital event platforms, but Clubhouse. And it was really interesting, and we had to use all of the features to our advantage to give that sense that you're at a formal event and not in an informal chat. For those that use Clubhouse, you're jumping into a room, listening to a conversation informally. And so that was a real interesting experience. And this morning I did a room on helping writers and podcasters launch their book or launch their podcast. And that was really fun. It was super intimate, and we just spent a lot of time diving, deeper on various questions as it related to how many shows did you launch with? What's the best publishing company to go to for a small author that actually wants physical books in their hands that's not super expensive? What topic should I narrow down my podcast show to be about now that I've decided that I actually want to do a podcast? And so anyway, it was just a lot of fun, just meeting really great, passionate people that have cool ideas to help their community. And one idea was on self-care, and the other idea was on helping models break into the industry. And I would love to get your thoughts on the self-care one, because he wanted to talk about self-care for men. He realized that there really isn't a place to have these conversations or go to find resources for self-care for men. What do you think about that?
I kind of agree. There's not. I've seen a few things out there that are trying to tap into that market a little bit. Oddly enough, one of the things I saw was like makeup for men. Speaking of self-care, hide the bags, hide the wrinkles, whatever. I don't know if I'd go that far, but there's it's kind of trending that way on some level. I completely agree with it. I think one of the issues with it that's going to be is culturally. Like in our society, it's not typically a topic that is either A, discussed with men, or B, almost embraced by men, because we're raised to be tough and rugged and individualistic. And part of that individualistic is I can handle anything, dealt to me, and I don't need any help, right? Which is complete and total BS, but that's kind of the way that that ethos is. And so I think a lot of that, as far as really growing that industry, is going to be changing the mindset, the ethos of American men and what they view American men to be. So
yeah, it's interesting, and I do remember covering stories in the magazine in Raine about makeup for men many years ago. It was this new trend. It was taking what was done on television and film, because most of the actors have makeup applied, and bringing it to the everyday person, everyday man. So that was something that was, and these products were very ahead of their time, I think. But the point about normalizing facials and pedicures and massages, and I don't know, what else would men do for self-care? I mean, women, we love talking about taking hot baths and mani-pedis, yes, but we love our hot baths. We love our, our bath bombs and our scented candles. And, so it's just an interesting conversation because I do feel that however you define self-care,
Yeah.
it ties back to your mental health. It ties back to bringing balance into your life, loving on yourself, right?
Yeah.
And paying attention to yourself, which is so important. And you could do it in different ways. Maybe for you, self-care is going out and gardening each day, and that's taking care of yourself because that's what you love to do. And you're not making money from gardening, but it makes you feel really good. So I feel like you could define self-care in many ways, but it is definitely a topic that you usually don't find synonymous. And you're not going to find that, I don't think, in the barbershop. I don't know. Maybe you would. I don't know. Is it a topic that barbers talk about? I have no idea.
I don't go to a barbershop. I go to a stylist. Maybe that's my definition or my version of self-care.
Okay.
I don't really, usually most barbershops I've heard about, it's usually talking about sports, talking about girls, like whatever. It's not necessarily what you did today to go and spoil yourself. That's typically not, and if it was a topic of conversation, it would be met with a lot of laughter and a lot of ribbing and kind of like locker rooms, that kind of stuff. So it is interesting because I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Texas, on a dairy. It was a very rugged, manly culture, and so I have no problem with men that do mani-pedis and take that level of self-care. But it is funny because I do view it differently than most of my cohorts in a city would because of where I grew up and the type of men that I grew up around. And so like I say, it's one of the things that I totally recognize the importance of. I just don't know if I would ever do, which is kind of hypocritical based on what I do, but it's kind of, I guess ingrained in me that that's just not something, that men do. It's kind of weird, right?
It's weird. No, I wouldn't say it's weird. I think it's just our culture. And
it is. I agree.
I feel also it's the definition of what we are saying self-care is. Yeah. And if self-care is only in that little bubble of getting your nails done, then most men aren't going to identify with the term self-care. But if self-care is about how can I find ways to show self-appreciation, give myself attention, which can be also defined as self-love. How do I find ways to give back to me? Because we're giving so much to everyone and all these external, tasks, roles, relationships. How much time are we taking back to give back to the individual, to the self, right? So I feel that part of it is just changing that narrative, changing that story around self-care. But it is so important, and it's not just nails. It's really, like I said, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I agree. And if you're going to define it that way, I think a lot of it then is, because in some ways that's almost a selfish behavior based on how Americans you should be giving to your family, giving to your work, giving to your kids, giving to your community, right? And it's all about give, which is a great way of living life. But you're right. You do need to take time for yourself and recharge. And if you're going to define self-care, basically, is that time to whatever it needs to be for you to recharge, whether it's yoga, whether it's, reading a book, whether it's mindfulness, whether it is that mani-pedi, right? I agree with that. And I think a lot of it is just, it's not only bringing attention to it about the importance of it, but I think it's also really educating people about how important it really is to take time for yourself and recharge, right? And love on yourself because, and it's weird because we're talking about, you and I are talking about this from kind of a humble perspective. I think you and I are fairly humble people, but then you see the complete opposite on TV with people who are completely in love with themselves and it's like me. So it's they're probably all into self-care. So it's kind of finding that, I guess, happy medium of those people that don't take enough care of themselves and educating them on the importance of it. And then, making it acceptable, making it safe to go and do those things and not be judged by your family or not be judged by your friends or, more importantly, not be judged by yourself. Because I would judge, in many ways, I think I would judge myself if I did some of that kind of stuff because I should be working. I should be, making phone calls. I should be marketing. I should be learning or research. So I would probably be the harshest critic, which I think is probably the case for a lot of high-achieving individuals.
You're absolutely right. And, that just made me think of this event that I was a part of yesterday. It was held at the University of Connecticut, and there were a group of companies, student startups, actually. Well, let me see, student-founded startups. And they were all competing for cash prizes. So think of the Shark Tank TV show setup. You had a panel of judges. You had each company, founders present their idea. The judges ask questions, and then there's a deliberation. So what was really fascinating is one of the companies, one of the startups that presented a subscription box around the concept of mental health. And as they were doing their pitch, they absolutely discussed how self-care is so important in our, in maintaining a healthy state of mind.
Yep.
And so I'm really happy to see that conversation and that topic is coming down to, a younger generation, a younger, set of individuals that are in their teens, late teens into their early 20s, where they're now stopping and thinking about how do I find balance? How do I protect my mental health, as opposed to blindly going into the world after college and getting into whatever that cycle is until they reach burnout, and it's a topic that I talk about in the book. We've talked about in past shows, in avoiding burnout, beating burnout, and that's really protecting your mental health and finding balance. And one way to do that is through self-care, right? And like you said, I think it's so important to redefine that, because there should be no judgment about finding those little things that make you feel good. You know what I'm saying? I don't know.
No, I agree. And the way you phrase that, I think, brings up an interesting point and a larger point, because in many ways, actually probably in all ways, self-care is something that you have control over from the standpoint of it's something you're choosing to do for yourself, right? And that takes time, and that takes energy and focus, and that means time and energy and focus are going to go away from somewhere else. So when you were talking about them, taking that and then going into the workforce, right? So many workforces are not that way, right? It's work 60, 80 hours a week, it's dedicate your time. It's all about work. So here's the question. How do you now integrate, that self-care part into an doesn't your self-care, it's all about your end results, right? And of course, the answer is, you change the culture, but if you don't have control over that culture, how do you do that? I think that's an interesting question to discuss.
Well, I think let's just remove the title, because I feel that we often get caught up in the do's and don'ts associated with a particular label. So if we remove the label of self-care, and it's more of a question of, what are the things that I love? What are the things that make me feel good? And how many of those things am I doing within the day? Or have I even done today? And I think there are temporary pleasures that end in a negative emotion. I'm not speaking about those things, because, substances are a way to temporarily feel good, but when that wears off, there's a negative end, to that, or emotion attached to that. So what are you doing that you love, that gives you a positive emotion from beginning to end? You're not going to walk away with, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that, or, I feel worse now than I did before I started. Just something that brings you pure joy.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's reading books, and maybe read a chapter. You don't have to read a whole book in a day, but maybe read for 15 minutes. That's giving back to yourself. You're doing something you truly enjoy. So much of our day is filled with the checklist, the have-tos. Once upon a time, we didn't have to deal with emails. Now it's literally creating stress for millions of people around the world, and taking up hours of our day.
Yep.
So how much time are you carving out for yourself that, is being taken up by tasks or to-dos or work-related or parent-related responsibilities? That's all. I think it's like removing the label, making it super simple. What do you do? More of what you love, basically. But at least try to do one thing that you love each day. Maybe you love to dance. Put on a record. Put on your playlist on your phone. Dance one song. What is that? 2-3 minutes? Now, if you're going to the older songs, 4 minutes of your day that you're dancing, you're giving back to yourself. We give so much to so many external things. We forget to give back to ourselves and replenish that well. So refill that well.
And I think what a lot of it boils down to, kind of based on what you're saying, is intentionality, right? Being like becoming aware of it, and then being intentional about integrating whatever it is into your life, right? And so to me, it's not only intentional, but then like you and I have talked about before, atomic habits. It's creating that habit. It's making that part of it, because self-care should be as daily or routine as showering and brushing your teeth, right? It's just something you do every day for, like that right there is, physical health and grooming. It's for mental health and grooming, essentially. And, so it's, taking control of that time, and it's scheduling, I'm going to do this at this time, and I'm going to do it for myself, and, everything be damned, right? Or it's, I'm going to get up 30 minutes earlier in the morning and work out or meditate or read, because that's what I need to center myself. Now, the other problem with that is, it creates one more item on a checklist that you already have a huge checklist of, right? So, to me, a lot of this really boils down to everybody's like, there's not enough time in the day, which is true. But the reason there's not enough time in the day is because we're so busy doing things for somebody else. And so that to me is always the biggest. Cause it's funny because you're talking about your event at UConn with the students, and I remember thinking that's a very privileged. What we're discussing is a very privileged concept, right? If you're struggling to pay bills, if you're struggling to find a job or make it to work, or you're spending 2 hours on the bus one way to get to work. Like, you're not really worried about this kind of stuff. So self-care in many ways is a very privileged conversation. So, like, how do you make sure people like that get involved in self-care? How do you make sure people who are working 60, 80 hours a week have the time to, do the self-care that's necessary so they can recharge, so they can be there for their families? And, maybe so they can also perform better at work. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I'm always curious about as well.
Yeah, well, again, I think it goes back to the label and what we're assuming self-care is. And let's just reverse it, care of self. Mm-hmm. Everyone sleeps at night, because if you stay up all night, multiple nights in a row, you're not going to be able to function. So you go to sleep to take care of yourself. If you aren't eating the right foods for a long period of time, it's also going to have an effect on you. If you aren't showering, it's going to have an effect on you. And so it's care of self. And it's what else do you want to put under that umbrella of care of self? Maybe you sit out in the sun for 10 minutes. Maybe you take a walk around your home or neighborhood for 5 minutes. It's care of self. So you don't need to go to a salon. You don't need to go to the barbershop. You don't need to get the nails done to care for yourself. And so it's more of taking that moment and really thinking about, what do I enjoy? That's like that simple. Me personally, I love nature. I love being outside. I love the sun. So for me, just getting outside, I get happy. I'm like, ooh, I'll go for a drive, or I'll go for a walk, or I'll go for a run. That's me caring for myself, and didn't cost me anything. And so I think it's more of, let's broaden what we're putting under this label of self-care. Maybe let's flip it around and call it caring for yourself, or caring of self, and so we can pay more attention to those things, which I think is a great time to transitioning to the psychology of fashion, because a lot of people don't really see a connection between caring of self and unleashing your greatest self and fashion. Like, what does fashion have to do with any of those things? But before we do dive into that, let's take a quick little pivot to recognize the sponsor for this show, which is the Pink Kangaru Podcast Network. And that's Kangaroo with a U. And the Pink Kangaru Podcast Network is for wild thinkers. If you think outside the box, if you are on a journey of growth, if you are looking to level up in life and or your business, definitely check out the Pink Kangaroo, and that's Kangaroo with a U, Podcast Network, pinkkangaroo.com. There are shows for creatives, aspirational individuals, and like I said, for wild thinkers. And if you are a host looking for a home for your show to launch, grow, or monetize your show, definitely check out Pink Kangaroo. So coming back to our conversation, which started on self-care, but we came today to talk about the psychology of fashion and how that plays a role in unleashing your supernova. And, unleashing your supernova is about tapping into that limitless potential that you have inside. It's already there. You don't have to go buy it, find it. It's a matter of unleashing it, cracking that egg open to let all of that goodness ooze out. So I want to, look at fashion and how it affects who we are, how we feel, and the role that it plays into also our self-care, in addition to reaching our highest potential. So I'll let you jump in here, Ryan. What are your thoughts?
It's funny. One of my favorite, he was a sports broadcaster until he got fired for random reasons, was Chris Carter. And I remember him saying one time when it came to, he was talking about his uniform, but he dresses this way too. It's like, if you look good, if you feel good. If you feel good, you perform good. And that was kind of his, attitude with, he used to do things like, get his uniform tailored, make sure everything was at the right exact level that it needs to be, and really detailed when he's putting his uniform on to go play a physical game that was going to get moved anyway. And he was the same with his dress as far as tailor and that. And so that's a huge part of it. If you put clothes on and you just have this feeling of damn, this I just know this looks good on me and it enhances me, it's going to affect everything. You're going to feel better about yourself mentally. You're going to feel more confident. You're going to be happy. You're going to say hi to more people. You never know where that's going to lead, right? You're going to take more you're going to take more chances when the opportunity comes along. It's the craziest thing that something as simple as what you're wearing really can completely change your mood, your outlook on the day, your outlook on life, right? Your outlook on the direction and where you're going with your life. It's super powerful, and it's something that I think a lot of people, especially in your industry, the fashion industry, tap into. But I know a lot of people, where I'm from, couldn't care less about, right? You go buy Walmart clothes, you go work in them, and who cares? But if you find that look that is right for you, it in many ways really can be life-changing.
I agree. When I launched my fashion line, my tagline was beauty from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, I have a background in psychology, trained to the master's level. And I do feel that we, again, going back to that inner brilliance, the inner supernova, that star that's ready to just burst and shine, that it starts within. Beauty and recognizing your inner beauty, going back to that self-care. If you believe you are worthy, deserving of these few moments of your day to give yourself that self-love or attention, that's about that inner beauty. And then I love that quote you mentioned, in terms of feeling good, performing better, looking good, feeling good, performing better.
Yeah.
Because it's very reciprocal. If you feel good on the inside, it's going to affect what you're putting on to adorn you and express how you're feeling. Yeah. That's going to receive a reaction and a response, which is going to reinforce a certain feeling or emotion. So it could be neutral, it could be super positive, or it could be negative.
Yep.
And that cycle continues. It's very much a boomerang, effect. Like what's going to go out is going to come back. And what you're adorning yourself with, if you're starting with the external, it's going to affect how you feel, which is going to affect how you stand and hold yourself. And then you're going to get reinforcement. And then that's going to encourage that same behavior. So I love it in the sense of sports. I didn't necessarily think about it as it relates to sports, but I don't know a poorly dressed athlete.
Nope.
I was, an athlete most of my, high school, college days. And you look forward to the uniform. You look forward to the jacket. You look forward to the sneakers. There is a lot of time that's placed in these uniforms, and there's a reason for that. And again, it's something we take for granted, like, oh, this school is blue and white and this school is, red and white or whatever, and we kind of let it be. But these athletes feel at the top of their game when they're putting these uniforms on. And so I love that comparison with sports, because you're not usually looking at fashion and sports and, and feeling good by what you're wearing or performing better by what you're wearing, as it relates to fashion. So I love that example that you gave.
Yeah, and this is one of those topics that I always get kind of squirmish with, because in some ways we're also in a society where it's superficial. So like, you shouldn't give a shit about how you look, because it's all about your performance and your inner beauty, right? And which is true. But I always came from the perspective of I wanted to win, and I was going to use every advantage I possibly could to win, right? And the example that I come up with is like, so when I lost my vision, I also gained a bunch of weight at the time because the medicine they put me on, whatever, right? And so, at a young age, we're talking 12 years old, before most especially male kids in the middle of nowhere, cared, I dressed really nice as I possibly could, as far as flattering for my figure at the time. And I did it because I always wanted to be perceived as a normal guy that happened to be blind versus a blind guy that happened to be normal. And, if everything matched, if I looked good, if I was fashionable, if my hair was, done well and fashionable, it was a reason for people to look past the fact that I couldn't see, gives me an opportunity to now prove myself as far as like personality, intelligence, or whatever, right? So I use it as a tool to enhance, everything about me, right? And that's how I've always viewed fashion. Is it's a tool to be used. Is it superficial? Yeah, maybe, but the reality is the way you strategically use it, there's nothing about that superficial, right? And it completely changes the doors that open to you as far as like potential employers, potential friends, and the reality is potential romantic partners as well, right? If you're dressing like a young professional, more than likely you're gonna be interested in people that are young professionals. If you're dressing like a BMX racer, more than likely you're gonna be engaging in dating people who are, BMX racers, right? Like, it seems so, again, superficial, but it's like, it really reflects who you are, what you believe in life, and the type of person that you either hang with or want to be.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, the last part of your statement with who you hang with or want to be. It ties back to the concept of identifying with a tribe, right?
Yes.
And I believe this is talked about in the book Atomic Habits, where there's a lot of things you can do to build positive habits and break not the best habits, to break the bad ones. And what I thought was interesting, then he brings out that leaving your current tribe is the hardest thing to do as it relates to breaking habits. And that's fascinating because we often identify our tribe with how we dress.
Yep.
Right? And so if you don't identify with that tribe and you're dressing a certain way, that could prove to be challenging. Or you are a part of a tribe and you decide to dress another way, then that also can bring judgment or criticism from the tribe. So I don't think people are being intentional from a judgment standpoint. I think it's just human nature, and a lot of this is subconscious, and how we react and interact based on the colors, textures, silhouettes, shapes that are around us, which includes what an individual is wearing. So if we just see this as a tool and we say, okay, we all have to wear something, depending on where you are in the world, that's going to vary. And so if you have to put something on and you are looking to be intentional, then you can use the science of colors to your advantage. You can use certain shapes and silhouettes that you're putting on to your advantage. You can use certain textiles to your advantage and see it as a tool in your toolkit to bring out that greatest version of yourself. So, for example, if your favorite color is yellow and you can care less about black, and let's just say you're neutral about black, by wearing yellow, you're going to feel more cheerful. So why not wear yellow more often? Or wear yellow when you're about to meet a new person, maybe for a friendship, a career move, or what have you. It makes you feel good. So you're going to act, more positively. You're going to be more confident. I mean, I see it as really, life is a game, right? And you can play it however you want to play it. You can choose to see it as a game or not. But if you decide to have more fun, in life, in the game of life, and if you understand, like, again, the science of psychology, the science of colors and things like that, and then you can use these little tidbits of information as tools in your toolkit to, again, reach that limitless potential that we're talking about.
I agree. I totally agree. Sorry, it was funny because when you were talking about that, I flashed back to my beliefs on this when I was high school, college, right? And a lot of this was reflective about where I grew up at the time, which was in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And I remember having to dress up for events and everything. And I remember the argument with my parents of, why do I need to wear this? It doesn't matter. No one else is going to be dressed this nice. And it's not what I'm wearing that's important. It's the fact that I'm showing up and being kind and being whatever that's important. And so, like, everything that I'm now arguing, I completely argued against as when I was younger. And in many ways, it was reflective of the culture that I was in. So that's why I was, like, pausing for a second when you were talking, because I'm like, it's just crazy how much my perspective has changed. And some of that's because I live in the city. And the standards are very different in a city as far as what is considered like professional attire, right? And the other part about it is I have gone into an arena, entrepreneurship, that requires a certain look, a certain demeanor, and there's a certain expectations that if I'm not fulfilling that role, people aren't going to take me seriously, which goes back to playing the game. So like I'm playing the game in order to be successful. So it's just funny how that opinion, that mindset has completely changed from it doesn't matter to it matters tremendously, because it does in the current environment, the current game that I'm playing. And it probably didn't matter as much back when I was, in small town Texas. But I'm no longer playing that game. That's no longer the person I want to be. And I want to go on and conquer and win in larger arenas. And in order to do that, I had to up different standards of behavior, and frankly, dress was one of them.
Yeah, and I see fashion as art, and I also see it as a form of expression. And It is one of the most powerful ways that we can communicate without words.
Yep.
And if you care to communicate, be intentional about that communication. It's saying something regardless if you're intending it to or not. I remember in grad school I did this social experiment where we had individuals within a room. It was a public space, and there was a constant stream of individuals coming through the doors. And we gave them a survey where they had to rate their impression of this person. They had to rate if they thought this person was mean or intelligent, kind. And it was based on just what the person was wearing.
Yep.
And we wanted to see if there were correlations with colors, because we did another experiment where we showed the same person in different colors, same silhouette, and rate their personality. And so, again, if you wore a red suit versus a blue suit versus a black suit versus a yellow suit, how would you be perceived? Just based on, the science of color, the psychology of color. And it was fascinating to see the results. Fascinating. And then you have the flip side. Based on possibly the weather, based on how you're feeling, you may decide to put on something that's a little looser or something more tailored, something that has texture versus something that doesn't. And your mood also triggers, what you put on, because that's what you're feeling, that's what you're conveying, that's the message you're sharing, the story you're sharing with the world. So it's fascinating, and we can go on and on in terms of, the science behind it. And, for our listeners, just take a quick search on, what colors, or search, the psychology of colors and see, what could you use to your advantage? Ryon loves red and orange.
Yep.
You want to share why you love red and orange?
Yeah, they've always appealed to me. I remember loving red as a kid. But more, what I always tell you is they're bright, bold, red's power, orange is fun and interesting, fun and dynamic. But I was always most guys wear black, blue, or gray, and I'm like, I wanted to be different. I wanted to stand out, and those colors just stood out. So it was just boom, right? It just kind of made sense. But I love color because it was just funny because I can't see, but it not only is expressive of different because most guys don't wear it, but each color tells its own story about who you are as well, as far as again, the reason I love red is because it is power, it is sophistication, it is very much that kind of masculine, just boom color. And then the irony is orange is kind of the lesser, funnier, goofier brother of red. It's the one that wants to go out, have a good time, go party, may or may not show up. So it's funny because it's like it marries the two halves of me, right? I was that funny, goofy, whatever kid, and then I've grown into the red as I've gotten older, right? And so that's really why I love those colors. And the irony is, I hate blue and green. They're too damn grounded. They're earth colors or earth tones. I need something that's more interesting and dynamic and faster moving and just higher energy, which is what red and orange are.
Yes, no, I love that. And I love how it, when you're starting to share that story in the beginning, how it was bold and fun and dynamic, and you want to stand out. And you're really using these colors to shape your personal story and how that story, is reinforcing how you feel inside and how you want to be interpreted. So again, you don't have to, for our listeners, you don't have to do anything with this information, but these are tips on how to continue to help you grow on your journey, your personal journey, your entrepreneurship journey. Is how does fashion fit into that? Wearing that cozy charcoal gray sweater, how does it make you? I say cozy, so obviously you can make me feel
cozy
good.
For you.
But, but for some people, wearing a textured wool sweater makes them want to itch, and it gives them the opposite
That was me,
reaction.
by the way. I was like, it sounds itchy as hell.
So, what is it that you can do within the space of how you dress to bring out those really, really positive feelings that you feel about yourself, and to add another layer of confidence, as you're going through your day, that's going to add to any of the performances that you may be making. You might be, when I say performing, any of the actions you're doing. Maybe it's cooking dinner, or maybe it's putting on that really cute workout outfit to go running. I was telling Ryan a story that when I decided to really jump back on my workout schedule, it was, going from zero to something is always challenging. And in my mind, I wanted to do it, but how I was going to get myself to physically start doing these really hard workouts. And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to go pick out a couple of really cute workout outfits, which I didn't have. And, they were going to be coordinated or whatever. And I'm going to feel good in these outfits, and I'm going to want to work out by just wearing them. And so that's what I did. I needed an extra incentive to hit my fitness goals, and I used clothes as that incentive. So I'm just saying it's a tool in your toolkit, and it doesn't matter what the silhouettes are. It's just that you want silhouettes that are going to complement you, make you feel more confident. You want colors that bring that smile on your face, that really enhance how you feel. And, if something is tailored versus not, how does that make you feel? Go for the one that makes you feel better, more confident, more beautiful, stronger, whatever it is. So just keep that in mind. I just want to share this quick story, and then I want to touch on how sustainability falls into this whole thing of unleashing your supernova as it relates to fashion. But there is a fashion blogger out of France, a French fashion YouTuber named Norny, and he wanted to do a social experiment as it related to the psychology of fashion. So he went out on the street dressed as a homeless person and decided to just fall to the ground to see how people would respond. And this was all videotaped. And people either scurried around him, moved out of the way, sped up as they were walking past him. And then he decided to do the same action in a suit. And he just fell to the ground suddenly in this public place. And people just ran to him to lift him up, to take care of him. And I'm not saying if it's right or wrong. Clearly, as humans, we tend to judge before we don't add judgment. And it's something that we all need to work on. But there is a response difference to both scenarios. And so, again, we can spend a lot of time on the psychology behind what that is, but he was just showing that people do react differently based on what you're wearing. And so if you're going into a meeting, and a lot of this is common sense, but you can really peel the onion layers, not just on, I'm going for an interview, I'm going to wear a nice clean suit, I'm going for an interview and I want to show them that I'm bold and dynamic, so maybe I'm going to wear a purple suit with a polka dot scarf or tie or something like that. And so it's like you could really go layer by layer and how you could take advantage of the psychology of fashion and how it could benefit you in tapping into that supernova. Ryan?
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to respond or that. Because I was
no, I didn't know if I was one of those mic drop moments where, I was dropping so much knowledge, you had to take a moment.
Yeah, well, I had two thoughts. First was the purple suit with the pink tie. I'm like, are they interviewing for the role of the Joker? That was that was one of the thoughts I had.
Well, I said polka dot. I didn't say pink.
But
I said polka dot.
Suit. You said purple suit.
Yeah, I did say purple suit with a polka dot tie or scarf.
But the other one I was thinking was, back to that experiment, it very much tapped into the story I was telling about, once I lost my vision, really really worrying about my dress and to present a certain image. I really wanted to portray a certain image, and it was completely different than every other blind person that was out there. And it's funny that you say that, because I walk around downtown and very rarely people, ask if I need help. And it's because I look like I have my shit together. Like, I'm dressed nice, I'm walking with a dog, I'm walking confidently, and I look like I know where I'm going. And it's a very different experience than a lot of other blind people that I've heard their stories. And I think that's a lot of the reason why, right, is because, I'm put together like a person who is competent would dress, right? I'm doing the mannerisms, whatever. And so it's very much affecting how much assistance people think I may or may not need. But the reality is, there's a lot of times I don't necessarily know, or not a lot, but there are those times that I don't necessarily know where I am, that I could use the help, and I don't get it because of that, right? I would rather have that situation the other way around. But
I could see that working for you and against you.
So I was just kind of thinking about that story when you were telling me. That's what I was thinking about when you thought it was a mic drop. But, it just shows the power.
No, it is very interesting. No, it's interesting, and of course, it brings two of my loves together: psychology and fashion. I love the analytical side of why this is happening, and then, of course, looking at the results and trying to figure out why it's happening. Yep. But I also appreciate how you can take that information and apply it to what you are trying to get out of your life experience or a situation. And so, again, the more you know, the more you can use, the more tools you have, the quicker you can fix that car or whatever it is you're trying to fix or put together, the faster you can get to your goals. And this is what it's all about. We all have dreams that we're trying to achieve, and it's just another way of helping get those dreams achieved. I just want to mention one more thing, because I know we're getting close to time, is sustainability and how that plays into this whole conversation, where most clothing, fast fashion clothing, is made in an environment where individuals aren't treated fairly or well, or the materials aren't the best materials for our bodies or the environment, and that carries a certain energy too. And we may not think about it, again, it's sort of self-conscious, but when you're wearing a handmade item, someone that's put in attention, going back to that word that we used, care, a love of the craft into that item, and you are then wearing it, that feels a whole lot different than wearing a fast fashion item off of the shelf where it's one of hundreds of thousands that look the same. And so we are moving into a space of more, I would say, conscious, fashion behaviors, ethical behaviors, and consumerism. And I feel that it can make all the difference when you're choosing something that's more sustainable as it relates to fashion and what you're wearing than something that's not. There is a certain level of energy, care, and love that goes into that item, which will then, again, everything has that reciprocal effect, right? You put that on, and this is all on a subconscious and a subatomic level, but I'm getting into my nerdy side. But anyway, that will affect you in a more positive way. And for anyone who's had the opportunity to have an item fitted or tailored to them, that is an unforgettable experience. There is a certain amount of energy and attention that craftsman, that tailor, that seamstress, it could be your aunt, it could be your mother or grandmother, that's putting towards that. And that feels a certain way when you're wearing that particular item. So I just want to say that definitely explore sustainable fashion more carefully and more intentionally, and or custom made or slowly made, slow fashion, because that also is another little tip that can give you that edge in how you feel and reaching your potential.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to quality versus quantity argument. 5 amazing pieces versus 25 average. That in and of itself is sustainable,
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, I think that wraps up our show for today. And, I loved our initial conversation around self-care or care of self. And then, what we touched on as it relates to the psychology of fashion. We didn't get into the adoption cycle. Maybe we could touch that on another show, where there are different roles and players that relate to how we are influenced by what we wear, or who is influencing what we wear. And that's really fascinating as well. Most high fashion is inspired by street fashion, not the other way around. And there's another phenomena where designers, when they release their collection once a year, and it's super secretive in terms of what they're debuting, but when you put it on the runway, you see a familiar theme and thread running through most of the collections. And that's that co-creative consciousness, that creative consciousness that you can't escape. Everyone's sort of tapping into that creative well of inspiration. So there's so many things that are fascinating as it relates to the psychology of fashion and how it affects us as entrepreneurs and creative entrepreneurs. So I was really happy that we were able to touch on that today.
Yeah, I was too. This conversation went in avenues I didn't expect, so it was fun.
Yeah, so that will wrap it up. And next time, we hope to have time for questions from our listeners. Thank you again so much, Ryon, for joining me on our live show. Thank you to our listeners for coming back each and every time. We so appreciate you. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and download the Unleash Your Supernova podcast. You can go to RaineMagazine.com and find it there. You can go to Evergreen Podcasts and find it there. And, of course, you can find it on the Pink Kangaru, that's Kangaroo with the U, podcast network. And, again, check out Ryon, Esquire.com. That's Ryon. If you are looking to level up your life and you're seeking a coach or a guide to help you get to your goals, accomplish your dreams, definitely check out RyonEsquire.com. And if you haven't yet, my final plug is get that Unleash Your Supernova book. I'm telling you, it works. The tips in there, the guidance, it's practical, actionable steps that you can apply immediately. It's a super easy read. Check out the reviews for yourself. You can get it on Amazon, all major bookstores. This is Lorraine, and thank you so much again for joining us, Ryon and myself, on the Unleash Your Supernova live show.